All set? Awesome. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of It's Personal. I am excited. I don't always have people like this beautiful human today on my podcast, but I am super excited because we're going to talk about some things that I often don't get to talk about. I am very new to this journey of publishing, but today I have someone who's an expert. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jenissa Graham, and I'm an agent and subrights manager at Bookends Literary Agency, and I'm excited to be here.
Janissa, how are you doing? How are things?
I'm doing great. You know, it's summertime I'm in New York, so it's getting to that hot heat. Publishing is publishing, but we're making it through.
Uh-huh. And is New York? I thought I read that New York. You're currently living in New York,
Yeah,
but
I'm
New
currently in
York.
Brooklyn.
Okay, and New York isn't home. Is that
Not
correct?
technically. Yeah, I was
Okay.
born upstate, but I moved to Georgia when I was 12, and so I've been there ever since. Then I relocated back to the city 2 years ago, and I'm
Okay.
excited to be here.
Wow. And I always start with this question, and feel free to go as deep as you want to. Tell me a little bit about little Janissa. What did that look like for you growing up as a kid? And specifically when it comes to, I guess, reading and writing and literature.
Yeah, so little Jenissa always had a book in her hand or a notebook. And I think
Hmm.
that's kind of when I knew I was maybe not a different child, but maybe now looking back, the more artsy one.
Uh-huh.
My mom and my sister, they went on their journeys in the education system, so teaching, things like that. I knew I wanted more on the creative side, so building stories, characters, worlds in my head. Random fact, I also played the violin, so I was also like,
Let's
orc director. So I
go.
was going to be on
Let's
that
go.
side of kind of the creative spectrum, I would call it. And so, yeah, between classes, writing like little stories, notebooks, talking about books, big fantasy reader growing up, but also
Hmm.
love like a good contemporary. And then I think, seeing it now, not a lot of people that like looked like us and kind of growing up and realizing now it's okay for us to be those main characters in those stories and
Hmm.
wanting to see it
Hmm.
more. And I think studied creative writing at Georgia State University, and they're the same thing. Like they're like, this is a dying entity. English is basic. Get into these fields. I'm not going to list it, but I was like, no, like I really want to be in creative writing, and then did like a lot of sales jobs and things like that. So I think little Janissa would be proud of where
Hmm.
maturing Janissa is right now,
Uh-huh.
and I look back.
I love that, and I don't know you personally, but I am proud, like, to see you in the position that you're in. When I've seen you online and others like you online, it makes me so happy to see that there are individuals like you who are not only paving the way, but looking out for authors like myself and others who are to come and who are already within the publishing industry because it matters so much. Representation matters so much. We can't say it enough. And I think it leads into my next question. And I wrote this question down actually. So like, how has your like background shaped your perspectives and the types of authors that you're like passionate about championing? Because I see that that's something you write in like your mission and what you want to do as a literary agent.
Yeah, I think it goes back to me like falling in love with the industry because I always wanted to be a writer first. And so even doing that though, maybe like I had a phase where I felt uncomfortable even having a black main character because I never saw it happen like really on
Hmm.
stage. And so I was like, okay, or on screen or on page. So it's like, okay, I can make this character black, but like having more questions about it. I think there's never been a moment where, as a white author, they have to like question whether they're going to be a main character. It's do I have to put somebody else in there? I feel like as a person of color, I'll speak like as a black person, as a black woman, like always having to second guess yourself. I didn't want to do that kind of when it came to the industry. I'm also a first generation Jamaican. My dad was born in Jamaica. My mom was born in London. So I really love stories that have that cultural background, that lore, and I think especially in fantasy, it's so big, and I think there's so many different identity conversations that we can have through storytelling that I want to see more in the forefront. And again, just increasing that number. When I got into the industry, it was what less than 5% of books
Wow.
by African Americans are being published
Wow.
traditionally. When that's ridiculous. And even the one that came out a couple years ago about in picture books, I know like you also do picture books and kind of kid lit as well, but there are more books about animals that came than
That's
people of color
crazy. That's
being published. And it's
crazy.
like, okay, we can connect with the fox, but we can't connect with the black or brown person, and that's such an issue to me.
Uh-huh. It is. It is. And I think it's so interesting because I've seen those graphics and those graphics have been shared so many times and it's still not enough. Like we, you know, publishing houses say it and agents and authors are saying it, but it's still not enough books. We still look at the shelves and we are still, you know, there's still a lack of representation for us. Were there people outside of it, in this, because it sounded like your family was an influence for you in regards to the books that you were reading? Were there teachers that have influenced the type of books that were put in your hand? You speak about fantasy, and I want to think about fantasy because I was never given fantasy books that had characters that looked like me. I was given the, you know, the Harry Potters, and it was like shoved down my throat. It was like this was the one you need to read. But what were there teachers out there or people out there outside of like your family that were giving you those books?
To be honest, not really. And I think that was
Hmm.
kind of the issue in that hole that was kind of being plugged. I had like a lot of teachers who were black women who were saying like, be proud of who you are. But like when it came to
Hmm.
teaching material, it was kind of telling a different story, not by their fault, but just because of kind of the curriculum that was being passed and also what we thought was out there. And then my mom,
Hmm.
she studied Black studies, African American studies. And so again, kind of seeing that balance of why is it only black stories told in this light, but not in like a fantasy world. And it wasn't until
Hmm.
I was reading more and I got into like more like the N.K. Jemisin and then reading like Angie Thomas and Caitlin
Hmm.
Byron and finally get into the book industry and saying like, oh, there is a demographic here. There are readers here. We aren't invisible. And
Hmm.
finally publishing is catching up. And so unfortunately I didn't have that growing up and that's why I want to fill and plug that hole in now.
Hmm. And I love that because all the people that you mentioned, they also like they sound like family. So when you're reading their stories, like their voices aren't covered up in, if I'm being super candid, like, you know, like the academia of education or what the typical book would look like. It doesn't sound white. It sounds like a black person or a person like us wrote it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love literature today. And a lot of the authors that are of today, because when I'm reading them, they make me feel like I'm at home. And I never had that growing up either. And it's just like really has shifted my mindset in regards to what I want to do as a writer, as well, because there is no limitations. But it does also depend a lot on someone like you, right? Someone like you who trusts that person in their voice, etc. Can you tell me a little bit about the voices that you represent, the voices that you look for in manuscripts, and what does that process look like for you when you're trying to find those individuals?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I'm like you kind of pointed out, and I'm always going to stay in your room, BIPOC first, and I think
Hmm.
that's always going to be my priority. And I think even when I hop on these offer calls, it's I'm not picking the story because it's a black book or Latinx book. It was a
Hmm.
really good book, and the main character happened to be black or brown,
Hmm.
and I hadn't
Hmm.
seen this before, and I think that's such a distinction that I really want to set forth for people in the book publishing industry. We're
Hmm.
not here to fill a quota or be a token. Like we deserve the same space as everyone else. So when it comes to like those backgrounds, how is it being approached differently? Is it going to be the structure? Is it going to be kind of like a retelling that we've seen being published hundreds of times by
Hmm.
a certain group of people, but not giving the opportunity for black and brown people? And I think really cultivating that voice, and I think that rawness of it. I read everything, so I'm going to do speculative, fantasy, sci-fi, contemporary, make me laugh, cry. I think as long as I think the good bones are there to really get into that main character, because I'm very character driven, I think, and very arc heavy, you kind of like sell me at the front door. And so when it comes to that process, I think it's really kind of like going through that one line pitch, going through those query notes, going through those pages, and really figuring out what was that factor for me. I call it the ooh line. So if I'm reading the query letter and I go like ooh, or like in the first 10 pages, I know you got me. And I think that's kind
Hmm.
of that thing that I'm waiting for, and I see it more now going on. And my range is from picture book all the way up to adult. I'll even do literary fiction, and that's important to me.
Hmm.
So BIPOC first, definitely, and also just any represented community. So if it's like own voices, if it's going to be like an adoptee story, something that like we never seen before, I always want to highlight any type of community that I think hasn't been to the forefront.
Hmm. I think that's so important. I think that's so important. I guess my next question is, because I kind of went through this phase when I first started looking for an agent. Like, what are the steps to find, not necessarily, I guess maybe, yeah, find someone like you? and then submitting some sort of piece of writing. Because one of the things I found when I went through that process is that y'all want different things. Like one person wants it this way, and I totally understand that, and I am such a, systematic person when it comes to things that are being given to me. So I totally understand why agents would want certain things a certain way. But let's talk specifically for you, and if you want to speak like on a broader sense of what agents look for, um, what do they do and when they send you information in regards to manuscripts, etc.
Yeah, so you can see like my submission
Yeah,
like
yeah.
rules. Usually like I'm using Query Manager now, so I'm gonna ask for query letter, first 10 pages. I don't require a synopsis just because like me and my writing background, I hated writing them, so I'm not gonna put an author through that. And I think that's kind of,
Good for
and because
you.
I also, yeah, you got to give back. And I think that's one of the things where like, I don't need this. Plus, I hate to be spoiled. Especially if it's
Uh-huh.
like a thriller, contemporary or fantasy. I don't want to be spoiled, so I'm never really going to read the synopsis. And I think it's important to authors to kind of have like a press kit. You should know
Mhm.
now. It's kind of like, as an author, like having that bio, headshot, kind of packet ready. And so, same thing when it comes to anybody who wants to query. At least have your first two chapters, I think,
Yeah.
tightened up, double space, Times New Roman, have that pitch letter, have a synopsis, because a lot of agents do require it. And just, a bio about you. And I think for me, it was really social media that got me really privy
Mm,
to all my opportunities. I found my first internship in publishing on the writing community and Twitter. That's where I'd found just other editors, other agents, other writers. So I think for right now, if you're somebody who is more social media savvy, getting involved in the writing community, a lot of pitch contests, I think, have landed people their agent,
agreed.
their book deals. And then if not, going on again, like Query Tracker, researching those agencies and going through like their major wish list. And I think it's important to think long term. If you just write this one genre, but you want to explore, look at somebody who kind of represents that whole range of things. I've seen like a lot of
Mhm.
clients who are like, I signed with this person and they only do middle grade, but I'm also looking for like picture book representation. And I think that can kind of get muddled down the way. So if you can find someone that's willing to kind of represent your whole career for longevity purposes, that'll probably be the best bet as well.
And I like that because, yeah, if you have to juggle multiple agents for multiple books, I could see that getting a little, I mean, for me at least, I would hate that. That I would not do well with that. I'm already like I'm a teacher and I'm already getting emails from like parents and staff, and like I just can't even imagine. And I already like I only have one agent right now, and I'm like, really taking my time in the process. And we get emails all the time. But like I can't imagine getting emails from different people about different things. I think that would drive me crazy. I mean, it may work for other people, but I could totally see how that could work out for having one person handling everything. And it's so interesting that you mentioned going online and being active with agents and people, because that's exactly kind of what I did. Like because I'm a reader and I have a lot of, authors that I enjoy, I just went and I was like, who is so and so's agent? Who is like, and I would go online and I would search like on Twitter or X and just be like, who's looking for submissions? And like you said, there's so many people that are constantly asking authors to share information with them, and then you just send them out, and then you kind of see what happens. So I appreciate that because sometimes I think people are just a little bit scared of what to do, or they don't know what to do, and it's not hard. It's just like I think the waiting can play a toll on some people as well, right? How many submissions would you say you get over time?
Um, I think now I'm at the point where if I reopen up the queries next week because I'm currently closed, I'd probably average about 5 or 550 a month, and then it's kind of like going through that. And
That's a
I
lot.
know, yeah.
That's a
So it
lot.
is, which is why I'm closed right now. I'm catching up. But I think, yeah, and I think for me personally, I don't go in order when it comes to queries. Usually, I'll filter it like, okay, today I know I want something more middle grade. I want something
Mhm,
more, serious. I might do like a contemporary. Or now I'm in the mood for a mystery thriller. If I have like my coffee with me, or
mhm,
wine. So I think it just depends on like I'm very much a mood reader as well. But yeah, I think agents are trying to do better with controlling their inbox because that wait time also has been a lot. But
mhm.
if we are getting like 100 plus a week,
It's
it is
crazy.
hard to keep up with. It does
It's
get overwhelming.
crazy.
And like if we're also still building a list, I'm still a newer agent. I'm two years in now, and I have about a list of 22 right now. So
Mhm.
juggling all of them, all that editorial type of styles, it does kind of pull me from my inbox sometimes. But I love when I'm reading queries though, and I can
Yeah.
find like a fresh new voice.
Yeah, I think that I could see why that is so fun because, like, especially if it's like a new author and they're just sharing for the first time and you get to be introduced to a new world, a new person, a new writing style, like all the things. I can totally see how intriguing that would be, and also difficult because if you're getting 50 or 100 of them, it's a lot of reading. That's so much reading,
And there's
right?
some agents that get way more. So I mean, I try not to complain because I see some agents post their stats and they got like 1,000 in this month, and I'm just like, oh
It's
god.
insane. That is insane. And I mean, those are some a I don't know if a lot of them are, but, like, some of them are novels, middle grade, young adult, adult, and those things are long. So I can't even imagine how much time it takes for you just to get through it, digest it, and then provide feedback, and then make a decision. Like, for you, is that like, do you know right away? Do you sit with it for a little bit? Like, how does that process work for you?
Yeah, so I think usually I'm able to kind of pinpoint right away if it's a good fit for me or not. There's sometimes I read the query letter, I'm like, oh, okay, this might be better for this agent at my agency.
Mm,
So I'll forward along and pass it to them. But usually by the query letter, I think that's why for me it's so important for the query letter to kind of be as polished as possible because I think I compare that to the cover when you're walking in a bookstore. So that
mhm,
query letter is the first thing that an agent is going to kind of see and read before that 10 pages. Same thing if you walk into a Barnes and Noble and you see like a book cover, that's gonna be the first thing that kind of stops you and say like, oh, okay, let me read more. And so
mm,
usually by the time that happens, I'll either read the query letter or even like the one line pitch. So how are you going to elevator pitch me your story in one line? What is the
mhm,
most important thing that you're trying to sell me on to keep my attention? And it's not saying because a story doesn't have those elements, but if I have 550, I have to narrow it down as quickly as possible, not even for my benefit, but also for that author, if we're even
mhm,
going to be the right fit, because I would hate to waste your time when it comes to
mhm,
querying because I know how hard it can be.
mhm. That was my next question, like, what makes a good query letter? And you just said it. I think that's the first thing you're gonna look at, right? And you're really and it's weird, and I don't have other words to say, but you're really selling your that's how you're selling yourself there, is through that letter. It's like who you are on a page before they get into like whatever the manuscript is. What do you what does your day to day look like outside of reading a lot?
Yeah. Yeah, outside of reading a lot, it's for me, it's also kind of relationship building. So getting to know all the editors out there, because if I have a very high kind of YA or even like adult list right now, hopping on the call with, editors from like a Viking children or a Harper children, something like that, getting to know like what they're looking for, what's on your list right now, what's kind of that slated schedule for 2026, what's working right now in the market, what's not working right now in the market. So being able to talk
Mhm,
to editors in real time about what's kind of going through sales meetings and what's not can also help
mhm,
me when it comes to like my list right now when it comes to that. So I think a lot of it is relationship building. A lot of it is client management. So talking to my new clients that either have just recently sold, so now we're working on, getting your press kit ready, having those cover meeting calls, that marketing calls, getting those blurbs ready. If it's somebody who's still revising, okay, let's hop on this creative call because, maybe you're stuck here. So let's have an hour call to really break down this world building. I'm very developmental when it comes to my editorial style. So let's bounce
mhm,
ideas off of each other when it comes to it. It's probably one of the most fun parts of my job. Or writing a pitch letter, creating a sub list,
mhm.
accounting. I think an agent wears so many hats under being an agent. We
Me
are, the
too.
accounting department. We are going through contracts to read it
It's
because
so
some
much.
agencies don't have a contract department. So I'm going through with the red pen,
Wow.
add an Esquire to my last name at some point because, this is what we're doing is following up on submissions. Sometimes, you know, having more talks with like within the agency department about like, okay, this is my syllabus going out next week. What do you think about it? So a lot of it's getting sometimes second eyes on things to just make sure
Mhm,
prepping
mhm.
submissions, talking to your clients, and at the end of the day, it's like, okay, cool. Now I can jump to my queries and find something else, or like
Wow.
blocking time off to read and edit. So it's a lot, but it's also exciting when we do get an offer, or we know someone's going to acquisitions as well.
Uh-huh, of course, and I think that's the most exciting part because you do so much. There's so much in the back end through the emails, the conversations, and then when the contract comes in, the conversations start happening with editors. There is so much exciting, um, so much excitement around that, and I know that feeling because it's still very, very new to me. Can you tell me about your time at Writer's House? Because we talked about this very briefly, and I didn't know that, but it makes me feel very happy.
Yeah,
It was an internship. Was an internship there, or I
it
can't
was both.
remember.
So I started off at the Writers Up Internship Program. That was my first job, like in the traditional publishing. And so I was there. I was interning under the desk of Marilee Heifetz, and I had my own supervisor there, Rebecca, as well. And so that's when I was learning how to really read queries and kind of make that deciding factor, and also learning like the other styles of other agents. So me trying to figure out what Marilee liked at that point in time, what things worked for her. And luckily enough for Marilee and for me and my benefit, she read everything. So middle grade graphic novels all the way up to adults. I got to see such a wide range of queries, which I loved. And then also kind of that one-on-one sessions with the mentorship director about learning more about the industry. So we went through like everything about sales, publicity, marketing, cover design, and really trying to figure out if you want to stay in publishing, what's the best job for you. I knew I either wanted to be an agent or editor, so we were working on like pitch letters. What does it mean to write a reader's report? What does it mean to write an editorial letter? How detailed do you have to be? So I think really sharpening and introducing me to the skills that later I would have. But after the internship program, they didn't have any full time spots as an agent assistant. So I ended up working, not ended up, I got the privilege to work in the sub rights department. And I was working under the EVP and the director of UK. And under there, I supported them in film and TV, theater, merchandise,
Wow,
UK rights, and permissions. And that's what I carried on
versatile!
over
You're
here. Yeah,
versatile.
that's like Jamaican in me. No, I'm just kidding. But I think it's something that and I learned just the love of sub rights, and I love sub rights, especially as like an agent who's trying to champion BIPOC voices, how to get those extra deals, how to get those extra income for my client between like a DNA and pub payment, something like that.
That is a lot, though. That
It
is
is.
so much. I mean, I see it a little bit in regards to working with Steve. Obviously, I don't know everything that he does, but yeah, it's just like, and you have I guess you have to have answers for everything, I guess. Like that part is mind-blowing to me because you're like you said you wanted to be an editor as well. And an agent kind of is also an editor because they're also looking at your work and helping you decide whether you should push it through, whether you should go back and like revise it, whether you should structure it differently. So like you are doing all those things all at once. And at the same time, you're doing the back end where thinking about the business side of it as well. Um, it's a lot of work.
It is. And coming into the industry, I had worked in a lot of sales jobs before that. So I knew I wanted a balance of still the business and the creativity side. And that's why I ended up going with an agent job, because you are still kind of handling your own business. Like my clients are my clients, even though I'm under bookends right now. And so I'm able to kind of build my list and cultivate that list differently than somebody else. But still being
Hmm.
in control of like the clients who I'm signing and how I'm equipping to build their career. It's something that I really enjoy from that kind of brand and marketing aspect. And then, yeah, still being an editor. And not only just Steve at Writers House, but there are so many different people, agents who had such a great list, and being able to really see how their clients were able to get deals in every other facet of just a primary deal, because that's what we think is kind of like the cream of the crop. It's either like a book deal and film and TV. We forget all the kind of nuances in between that. So being able to really
Hmm.
learn that and know how to handle that was really cool.
It's such a science. It's such a science. Like, and I'm still very new, but as I talk to other authors and as I'm working with an agent, like you really get to see how they can navigate, you know, contracts and have conversations around certain things that you don't even know to talk about as an author because you're really, I don't want to say just a writer, but like you're writing, you're doing the writing to get to the publishing part. And if they don't talk about those things, you probably wouldn't know, especially as a new author, you wouldn't know. You really, really wouldn't know. So you have to know so much as an agent. So I appreciate you guys so much. I really do.
Yeah. And I think there's been like a sort of veil that's been lifted from authors to kind of now the publishing side. I think before I got into industry, it's kind of like, yeah, you're an author, and then someone else is kind of handling, your deals. Where now I think so
Hmm.
many authors now, and rightfully so, want to have questions like, well, what does this mean? And so why are you
Hmm.
asking for this? And so I think it's really important to know what you are signing and what, the negotiation strategy is going into
Yep.
any type of deal, whether it's primary or sub rights, and like what that means long term for you and longevity wise for your career.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. What do you do for fun? Because I know you're busy. I know you are very busy. What do you do for joy? And you cannot. I mean, you can say reading, but give me more.
Ooh. Well, being in New York, I'm able to walk everywhere. So there's like an art gallery that's literally right around the corner from my apartment. So going
Hmm.
there like every other weekend, trying to go at least once a month to see what new kind of creations are there. Trying new food. I'm a big foodie girl, so trying new places. I'm still trying to learn my way around New York, so exploring different areas, walking to the farmers market, getting something very small, um, hanging out with colleagues here, some of my friends, and I think just enjoying like that me time. I think a lot of time for me, at least in publishing, I'm talking to so many different people throughout
Hmm.
the day. So kind of taking that alone time and just going somewhere and sometimes just sitting
Yeah.
um, doing different things. I'm also very big into like theater, musicals, so Broadway shows that are kind of coming out are a cool thing to do. I like watching creativity in different mediums, whether it's dance, art, so any other form.
And you're at literally the mecca of all of that. So that is. Have you seen anything recently in regards to musicals or theater?
2 weeks ago, I went to the opera for the first time and saw Fire Shut Up in My Bones, and that was
Oh my
really good.
gosh, I'm
I
so
had this
jealous.
no, the screen wasn't working though because since they're singing the whole time, so you forget that they're not really talking, and so I tried
Uh-huh.
to put it on English subtitles, and it was in German for the second half of the whole thing,
Uh-huh.
but I still was able to appreciate it, even though I don't speak German. But that, or I saw the piano lesson last year, and that included John David Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Daniel Brooks, and that was really good as well. I saw Titanic a couple weeks ago, and that
Wow.
was like a really funny like off Broadway musical telling Celine Dion's story of how she was on the Titanic and just
Wow.
really random things.
But I feel like there's always stuff happening. There's
Yeah,
always something happening. I mean, I'm like a I'm not a big I would say I'm a big sports person, but there's always sports things, there's always theater, there's always people there. There's always something happening. So I can't there's probably no shortage of events that you can find and I guess from all the ranges from like the biggest events to maybe smaller things as well where they're like more local shows or people who are like, trying to make it so to speak as well, which is really good. Which is really good. I have a couple more questions for you. One of the
yeah.
questions was I was thinking about just like publishing in general, and are you seeing any trends in publishing right now um, in regards to not necessarily who they're taking on as writers, but just like overall in publishing? Because I know that there's been a lot of things happening with a lot of different publishing houses. But do you see any trends over the last few years in publishing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really big was not because of, but as a result of kind of like book talk and that kind of growing and blowing up. A lot of indie authors being able to kind of get that traditional deal that maybe at when they first started writing they weren't looking for, but now that they have like 3 books out and more kind of clients and more fans, they really want someone else to kind of handle that marketing publicity. So I've been seeing a really big shift of indie authors now coming in, balancing and having 2 careers, still writing indie books and still being able to traditionally start like a new series with like a publishing house. I'm also
Hmm.
seeing a lot of adult kind of taking off when it comes to like the fantasy element of it. I think for a very long time, and myself included, we saw fantasy in like that YA space, really, or even like the upper YA, but not
Hmm.
really saying like, adult can be here in like a sci-fi fantasy space in more than one imprint. And so I think things like Marvel and like The Witcher and Carnival Row kind of coming out really kind of push that, oh, there's still people who are, between this age range that still want to see fantasy just with, adult characters. Doing that, Kidlit isn't going anywhere. I know there's been like a
Hmm.
big uproar about middle grade, but I think it's just coming in trends. I mean, we need
Hmm.
middle grade to get to people my age to read books. So, and I love middle grade. And I think picture books is always selling as well. Like,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah.
think there are certain things that are not going anywhere: romance, rom coms, thrillers, and then different trends. Heist were in a couple years ago when I think like Portrait of a Thief came out. Now it's kind of lulling a bit more. The Thieves Gambit that did really well. So I think there are the few trends that come and go, but there's always going to be like the staples. I think in book publishing.
Yeah. I mean, we always need books.
Yeah,
We're always gonna need new books, right? I think it's
yeah,
so interesting the middle school thing. I talked about this with someone else, but like I think it's such a crucial time in a kid's life, and this is it's literally what we say. We always talk about the middle child and how like we abandon the middle child, etc. Like the middle school is such a crucial time in a kid's life, and the attention that it needs in regards to literature right now, specifically in the world today, is even bigger than it's ever been. Like we should be leaning even more into middle school and asking for more stories about multiple people and how the world is working in society in general. Like there's so much happening and those kids need it more than anybody. They're going through the most, their hormones are everywhere. They are like, relationships, all the stuff. So when I hear people talking about middle school books, it's like, yeah, we need more of them. That's it, period. Like, that's it. Like, it's not dead at all. We just need more of them. We need
Yeah.
a variety of range, etc. Those kids are so important. They're so important. Um, this was really fun. Where are you? You say you're online a little bit. So, where
Yeah.
can people find you online?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Jenissa Michelle. That's really gonna be like my agenting page. I'm on Instagram, maybe this year, just because I have more clients now, more illustrators. I wanna showcase their work. So you can find me on Twitter.
Awesome. Awesome. And you're not open for submission right now, um, which is okay.
Yeah.
But if someone's listening, do you have like a time frame for when you may be open again, or is that kind of just like kind of goes and flows depending on how you're feeling?
Yeah, so right now I do want to be open at least twice out of the year. I'm shifting out of the sub rights role at the end of this month to agent full time. So I
Hmm.
would love to open a query sometime this summer. So either like a late June, early July, and that's my game plan. I just have a
Hmm.
couple more full manuscripts I want to kind of get through that get feedback back to authors on. So if you are looking for, representation, I am out there. Again, I do picture book all the way up into adult fiction and select nonfiction. And I'm also going to be doing Kid Lit Pit as well. So a lot of the writing community, like Twitter pitch contests, I usually kind of pop in, see
Hmm.
things I like, and then even if I'm not open to queries, I can send you a link where you can show stuff to me.
Thank you. That's all we can ask for. That's all we can ask for.